Welcome to Module 2 of our lecture series on the nation-state, national sovereignty, and nation-building. In this module, we will explore the complex dynamics of nationalities under Soviet rule. We will examine both the traditional and revisionist views on how Soviet policies impacted the development of its constituent nations, focusing on cultural and educational policies such as Korenizatsiya and Russification. Historically, the traditional view posits that Soviet rule suppressed and denied the national expression of non-Russian nationalities. According to this perspective, the Soviet regime sought to create a homogeneous Soviet identity, often at the expense of local cultures and languages. Non-Russian nations such as Kazakhs, Uzbeks, and others were seen as victims of Soviet policies aimed at eradicating their unique cultural identities. Under this view, Soviet policies were characterized by forced assimilation and the suppression of nationalistic sentiments. For example, national symbols and languages were often sidelined in favor of promoting Russian language and culture. National movements were repressed, and expressions of national identity were often labeled as counter-revolutionary or anti-Soviet. However, this perspective has been increasingly challenged by scholars who argue that Soviet policies were more complex and nuanced than outright suppression. The revisionist view offers a more nuanced understanding of Soviet policies, suggesting that these policies actually fostered national self-awareness and played a significant role in constructing national identities. This perspective highlights the dual nature of Soviet nationalities policy, which included both Korenizatsiya, indigenization, and Russification. Korenizatsiya, or indigenization, was a policy aimed at promoting the inclusion of non-Russian nationalities in the administration and cultural life of their respective republics. Implemented in the 1920s, this policy encouraged the use of local languages, the promotion of local cultures, and the training of local elites. The goal was to integrate non-Russian nationalities into the Soviet system by giving them a stake in the new socialist society. For example, in the Kazakh Soviet Socialist Republic, Korenizatsiya led to the establishment of Kazakh language schools, newspapers, and cultural institutions. Local leaders were trained and promoted within the Communist Party, creating a new Kazakh intelligentsia that was loyal to the Soviet regime but also committed to preserving Kazakh culture. This policy fostered a sense of national self-awareness among non-Russian nationalities, as it allowed them to retain and develop their cultural identities within the framework of the Soviet state. Rather than erasing national identities, Korenizatsiya helped to construct and institutionalize them. In contrast to Korenizatsiya, Russification aimed to promote Russian language and culture across the Soviet Union. This policy was driven by the belief that a unified Soviet identity required a common language and cultural framework. As a result, Russian was promoted as the language of administration, education, and interethnic communication. Russification had mixed effects on non-Russian nationalities. On one hand, it facilitated communication and integration within the diverse Soviet Union. On the other hand, it often marginalized local languages and cultures, leading to tensions and resistance among non-Russian nationalities. For instance, in Central Asia, the promotion of Russian sometimes clashed with local efforts to revive and promote indigenous languages and cultures. While Russification aimed to create a cohesive Soviet identity, it also highlighted the tensions between the center and the periphery, between Russian culture and the diverse cultures of the Soviet republics. The interplay between Korenizatsiya and Russification illustrates the complexity of Soviet nationalities policy. While Korenizatsiya promoted the development of national identities, Russification sought to create a unified Soviet identity. This dual approach had profound and lasting effects on the national development of Soviet republics. Roland Gregor Suny, a prominent historian and political scientist, provides a constructivist approach to understanding Soviet nationalities policy. In his influential works, Suny argues that Soviet policies played a significant role in constructing ethnic nations within the USSR. Suny challenges the traditional view that Soviet policies merely suppressed national identities. Instead, he posits that these policies actively contributed to the formation of national consciousness and the consolidation of ethnic identities. By creating union republics and formalizing ethnic boundaries, the Soviet state institutionalized national identities and provided a framework for their development. For example, the creation of the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic institutionalized Ukrainian identity by promoting the Ukrainian language, culture, and history. This process helped to consolidate a modern Ukrainian national consciousness, even as it sought to integrate Ukraine into the broader Soviet system. Sunia's constructivist approach highlights the role of Soviet policies in shaping the identities of post-Soviet nations. He argues that these policies laid the groundwork for the national movements and independence struggles that emerged in the late 20th century. In conclusion, the traditional and revisionist views offer different perspectives on the impact of Soviet rule on national development. While the traditional view emphasizes suppression and denial of national expression, the revisionist view highlights the constructive role of Soviet policies in fostering national self-awareness and building national identities. Soviet cultural and educational policies, such as Korenizatsiya and Russification, played a dual role in promoting both local and Soviet identities. By examining these policies and their effects, we can gain a deeper understanding of the complex dynamics of nationalities under Soviet rule. Thank you for joining me in this detailed exploration of nationalities under Soviet rule. Let's continue our journey by examining the constructionist approaches to nation building in the next module, where we will explore the work of Roland Gregor Suni and the role of Soviet policies in constructing ethnic nations.